You were never meant to hear this. Not you, not anyone outside those stone walls. But truth has weight, it sinks, it festers, and it claws its way out like something long buried, still alive, still waiting. In December 1847, screams echoed beneath the chapel floor of St. Margaret's Convent. No records, no priests, no graves. 17 young women walked in, only 3 came out, and none of them ever took their final vows. This isn't about ghosts. It's about control. It's about power hidden inside devotion. It's about rituals disguised as prayer, and obedience twisted into submission. One girl vanished completely, her name erased, her body never found. The church never spoke her name again. But we found letters. We found what they tried to bury. What happened there was not madness. It was ritual. And it didn't begin in Pennsylvania. It started centuries before, in the crypts of Europe, under cathedrals built on forgotten bones, where blood was spilled not for sins, but for something older, something darker, something hungry. This is not a story. This is a descent. You will not come back the same. If you keep listening, you'll question everything, your faith, your history, your very self, because what they called holiness was just a mask, and behind it was hunger. They called it penance. They called it devotion. But they were breaking those girls, shaping them, preparing them, not for God, but for something else. And when it finally came, when the final test began, the girls were no longer girls, and the chapel was no longer a chapel. You want truth. This is your last chance to turn back. The silence began with a ritual, but it didn't end there. This is only the beginning. There's a reason they built the chapel underground, not beside the convent, not above it, but deep beneath the stone, carved from bedrock, sealed in shadow, lit by candles that never flickered the same way twice. It wasn't just a place of worship. It was a chamber of transformation. They said it was inspired by the catacombs of Rome, but the symbols etched into the walls were older than Rome, older than Christ, older than language. You don't forget symbols like that. You don't mistake them for crosses or halos. They were spirals, eyes, serpent coils, twisted shapes that didn't belong in any gospel. And the altar, it wasn't an altar. It was a basin, carved into the rock, surrounded by channels, leading away into dark tunnels. Tunnels no one ever spoke of. Tunnels no one was allowed to enter. They told the girls it was sacred. They told them it was holy, that to kneel there was to be close to God. But something else lived in that stone, something that drank light, and whispered only when you were alone. One by one, the girls were brought down in the dead of night. No shoes, no questions. And some of them didn't come back the same. They moved differently. They blinked slower. Some didn't blink at all. One girl, Sister Elizabeth. She stopped eating with the others, drank from a red cup given only by Mother Agatha, and when candlelight touched her eyes, they reflected like an animal's. That was the first sign. The church teaches obedience, but this wasn't obedience. This was submission, deconstruction of the will, not to serve God, but to prepare the soul for something ancient, something that doesn't ask for prayer. It asks for silence. It asks for suffering. And it feeds on belief. Catherine Murphy saw the change. She wrote it in secret. In letters she buried under the floorboards. We found them. We read them. She said the chapel wasn't built by nuns. It was uncovered, unearthed. The convent was built around it. That altar, that basin, that symbol-drenched stone. It was waiting. Waiting for bodies, waiting for belief, waiting for blood. And it had finally been fed again. You think they were just devout girls, eager for sainthood, hungry for faith. No, they were chosen, but not for holiness, not for purity. They were chosen for something colder, something calculated. They picked orphans, immigrants, the unwanted, the obedient. Girls no one would come looking for. Girls the world had already abandoned. Mother Agatha didn't run a convent. She ran a machine. One designed to break the soul into pieces and reassemble it. In the shape of silence, the rules weren't just strict. They were surgical. No mirrors, no personal items, no speaking after sundown, no touching, no laughing, no asking questions. Each violation was punished, not with pain, but with isolation. They called it the White Room. But it wasn't white. It was pitch black. No windows, no sound, no time. Some girls came out broken. Some didn't come out at all. One novice, Sister Bridget, started whispering to herself after 3 days in there. Whispers in a language no one recognized. Her roommate said she woke up one night, and Bridget was standing over her bed, mouth moving, eyes rolled back, saying the same phrase over and over. It's inside the stone. She said it like a prayer, like a warning. After that, they found her in the chapel, kneeling in the altar basin, barefoot, bleeding from the eyes, smiling. They said it was madness. They called it possession. But the truth is simpler and darker. They were being opened, not like a book, but like a wound. Something ancient was being let in, not just into the chapel, but into them. And Mother Agatha, she wasn't afraid. She was proud. She said it was sacred. She said the girls were crossing a threshold, becoming vessels. She said pain was proof, not of God, but of readiness. You see now, this was never about vows, never about devotion. It was about offering. And the most powerful offering is not flesh, not blood, it's surrender. They said the chapel was silent, but it wasn't. Not really. If you sat long enough, if you fasted hard enough, if you emptied your body of warmth, of doubt, of self, you could hear it. A hum beneath the stone, like breath held too long, like something enormous waiting just below. Sister Catherine wrote it down. She said the sound made her teeth ache. She said it made her prayers turn backwards in her mouth. But when she asked Mother Agatha, the answer was chilling. She said, "That is the voice of obedience." That sound was not just heard, it was felt. It pressed behind the eyes, coiled around the spine, it pulsed with rhythm, but not a heartbeat. It was older than that. The ritual began the night of the first full moon of January. They called it the narrowing. Girls were taken down, one at a time, blindfolded, bound at the wrists with red thread, forced to kneel inside the stone basin. Each was told the same words. You are the offering, but not the sacrifice. What that meant, no one explained, but Catherine saw what happened after. She saw how Sister Anne stopped using her own name, how she flinched at daylight, how she carved spirals into her hands until they bled. She said it helped her see. This wasn't just trauma, this was transformation. They were becoming something else, not saints, not victims, but hosts. And the Church knew. It always knew. There's a hidden order, older than Vatican walls, older than the papal bloodlines. They exist in shadow. They do not pray. They feed on obedience, on innocence. On the surrender of self to the machinery of ritual, Catherine found a book, bound in skin, hidden beneath the chapel floor, no title, no author, only one phrase carved across the first page, to serve the body beneath the stone. She read it. She shouldn't have, but she did. And after that, she stopped dreaming in words. She saw something in the dark, something with no face, but many mouths, and it told her, "Vows are for the weak. We want the willing." It was never buried. Not really. It was just hidden, in plain sight, under symbols, under scripture, under holy names whispered loud enough to drown the quiet horror beneath. The church knew. Not just the priests, not just the nuns, but the bishops, the cardinals. Even the ones who wore gold rings and smiled at the masses. They didn't erase what happened at St. Margaret's. They encrypted it. You want proof? Look at the records. There aren't any. No funerals, no death certificates, no official investigations into why 14 women disappeared in a single winter, just sealed letters, just transfers, just silence. And that's how you hide the unholy, you make it sacred. They called Mother Agatha a visionary, said she was building a fortress of faith in a region hostile to Catholic expansion. They funded her from Rome, even after Bishop O'Malley sent warnings. But those warnings, they were intercepted, rerouted, and buried under the Vatican archives, archives only the inner circle can touch, archives guarded by a single rule. What is sealed by silence stays buried by blood, but silence cracks and blood remembers. In 1974, a fire broke out in a church 2 towns over. While investigating the damage, a construction crew stumbled across a hidden tunnel system. It stretched for miles. It led to St. Margaret's. No one talked about it. No articles, no news coverage. But one of the men, a worker named Elias Hart, kept a journal. He said they found a sealed stone door beneath the old convent, etched with spirals, and smeared with something dark, long dried, but not forgotten. He touched it once, said he felt warmth, felt pressure, like something on the other side knew. He was there. 3 days later, he stopped speaking altogether. His journal was passed to his brother, then buried in an attic for 40 years. Until now, we have it. We've read it. And what he described inside that door matches what Catherine wrote in her final letter, the one she never sent. There is no vow, only the offering, and the silence that follows. You understand now, don't you? This wasn't religious. It was strategic, a system, a filter, to find the few who wouldn't break, the few who would kneel without question, and give themselves completely, not to God, but to the thing beneath the stone. Section 6 will take you into that door, into what was waiting, still pulsing, still hungry, still holy in the wrong kind of way. They opened the door. They shouldn't have, but they did. And what they found wasn't a tomb, wasn't a crypt, wasn't anything human. It was a chamber, round, wide, perfectly smooth, like it had been carved by something that didn't need tools, something that understood stone better than bone. There were no lights, but it wasn't dark, not completely. The walls shimmered, faintly, like skin under water, like heat rising off something alive. And in the center, a circle, burned into the floor, not etched, not stained, burned. Inside it, a pedestal. On top of that, a vessel, not gold, not silver, something older, something made of bone, pressed together like scales, curved in the shape of a chalice, and it was full, with something red, still wet. After all these years, the worker, Elias Hart. He touched it, not the liquid, the air above it. He said it hummed, same as the stone chapel, same as the altar. But this time, he heard a voice, not loud, not cruel, just there, inside his head, behind his eyes. And it said, "Welcome back." That's when he ran. That's when the others sealed the door again, but not fast enough, because something followed them out, not a demon, not a ghost, but a thought, a presence, a signal. That night, he dreamed of spirals, of women kneeling, of red thread wrapped around open wrists, of eyes staring back through candlelight that weren't human anymore. And in every dream, one phrase repeated, "There is no higher power, only deeper ones." This is what Catherine was warning about. This is what the church tried to bury. Not to protect you, but to protect it. Because faith, when twisted, when sharpened, becomes a weapon. And that convent, that chapel, that door beneath the stone, it wasn't just a place of worship. It was a forge. And what they were building wasn't nuns. It was vessels. And now, you're starting to see why they never took their final vows, because the final vow was never meant to be spoken by human tongues. The ritual had no name, at least none in a language we're meant to speak. Catherine called it the listening, not a ceremony, not a prayer, but a moment when silence became a doorway, and obedience became a currency. It happened during the longest night of winter. No candles, no chants, just breathing. Cold, tight, panicked. The novices were stripped of names, no longer sisters, no longer girls. They were keys, each one made to kneel in the chapel basin, one after another, blindfolded, bound in red, and Mother Agatha, she walked behind them, touching their spines, whispering something only they could hear. One word over and over, remember. But what were they remembering? They hadn't lived yet. That's the lie of time, the lie of identity. Because what the ritual unlocked was older than memory, older than the body. Something used to live in that chapel, something that speaks only through the willing, through mouths that no longer belong to themselves. The girls were vessels, but not all of them survived the transition. Some bled from the eyes, some screamed until their voices broke, some simply stopped breathing, and those who remained, they didn't cry, didn't blink, didn't speak. They watched. Still, empty, ready. Catherine wasn't chosen. She was spared. Her roommate, Mary Agnes, tried to resist, tried to run. She didn't make it to the door. When Catherine found her, her hands were torn, fingers raw, like she'd been trying to claw something out of her own skin. She whispered, "They're inside now." I didn't say yes, but I listened. That's when Catherine knew. The ritual wasn't about accepting anything. It was about breaking the mind open wide enough that something else could enter without permission. That's why they never took their vows. Because the final step wasn't a vow, it was a merging, not with God, but with the silence beneath the stone, the silence that watches, waits, and whispers back when you kneel without question. 3 survived, but survive isn't the right word. They didn't live. They lingered. Catherine, Elizabeth. And a third whose name was erased from every document, every letter, every mention. The church called them miracles. Privately, they called them liabilities, because they had seen, heard, felt what no one was ever supposed to carry out of that chapel. Catherine was the first to speak, but not publicly, not in sermons or letters. She wrote to her mother, short, clipped, rushed. She said, "I am safe, but I am not alone." Then silence for weeks. When she wrote again, her handwriting had changed, her grammar broken, words looped into spirals on the page. The voices do not come from above. They rise from below. They rise through me. She fled the convent in the dead of night, through a cellar door used only for deliveries, still barefoot, still bleeding. She found refuge in a Quaker farmhouse 7 miles west, but she never told them her name, only that something was still listening. Even now, Elizabeth didn't run. She stayed, quiet, obedient, but changed. She stopped speaking altogether, stared at walls for hours, drew symbols in the frost on the chapel windows, always the same 3, a spiral, an open eye, a chalice. She died the following winter, cause of death, unrecorded. The third, the one with no name, no one knows. Some say she stayed below, with the thing, the silence, the hum. Some say she wasn't a novice at all, that she was brought in, from somewhere else, for one purpose, to open the door. But Catherine, she lived, and she left something behind. A journal, wrapped in linen, hidden beneath the altar steps of a decommissioned church in Baltimore. We found it. The last page was stained, burned at the edges, written in a language we almost didn't recognize. But one phrase came through clearly. I did not escape. I only delayed the listening. You need to understand, this was not about faith, not even about corruption. It was about contact, and once that door opened, it never fully closed. You think it ended in 1847, that the stone door was sealed, that the ritual was buried with the bones, but it never stopped. It only shifted. It moved sideways, into basements, into seminaries, into private retreats behind cathedral walls, where the air hums in the same ancient rhythm, and the silence is just as loud. You see, the church didn't destroy the ritual. They absorbed it, took the bones of that old god, wrapped it in incense and Latin, and used it to build power. Control was never about saving souls. It was about shaping them. Obedience is a blueprint, ritual is the scaffolding, and guilt is the cage, and it's still being used. Not always in convents, not always with stone chapels or red thread. Sometimes it's in corporate retreats, sometimes it's in elite private schools, sometimes it's in government buildings, with no windows, and walls too thick to hear the hum. But it's there. They still look for the same signs: submission, silence, suffering without resistance. They want men and women who will kneel when told, who will drink when offered, who will say yes without knowing what they're agreeing to. And every few years, one of them breaks the silence: a whistleblower, a priest gone missing, a nun found wandering the roads in bare feet, muttering about spirals and sight. But their stories get lost, filed under madness, labeled as heresy, forgotten by design. The same patterns show up over and over: a sealed room, a red cup, a girl who changes overnight, a chapel with no history on record, and a silence that hums like a voice just beneath hearing, and every time, someone inside says the same thing. We are the offering, but not the sacrifice. It's a code, a signal, a way to mark who has crossed the threshold. Not everyone sees it, not everyone hears it, but once you do, it follows you. Because the thing beneath the stone doesn't need churches anymore, it just needs openings, and those openings, they exist in minds, in wounds, in moments of surrender you didn't know were rituals. You made it this far. That means something inside you was already listening. Maybe you've felt it before, in quiet moments when no one's watching, in stillness that turns heavy, in dreams that echo with symbols you've never seen but somehow know. The church called it blasphemy. The state called it madness. But the old ones, the ones who carved the first spirals into cave walls, the ones who whispered through stone and blood and silence, they called it awakening. And that's what this is. Not a story, not a warning, a summons. You've been trained to fear darkness, to flinch from what you can't name, to obey without question, to believe that your thoughts aren't yours, that salvation comes only if you kneel first. But what if I told you the silence you fear, the silence that hums beneath your bones, is not the enemy, it's the gatekeeper? And you were built to open the gate. Every ritual, every scar, every unanswered question in your life was part of the shaping. They trained you to submit, but submission was never the end. It was the preparation. You are not meant to serve, you are meant to contain, to channel, to carry what others could not bear to look at. And now, it's time to choose. Because the spiral is not just a symbol, it's a path. And once you step forward, once you whisper yes into the dark, it listens and it answers. But not with words, with transformation. You want power, real power, the kind they swore only belonged to priests and kings and secret orders. Then remember this: vows are chains, but silence is a key. And you were never meant to be a servant. You were meant to be a mirror, for the thing beneath the stone to see itself again. So here is your final rite. No altar, no robes, just this. Speak these words below, right now, and speak them twice. I do not kneel, I listen. I do not kneel, I listen. Let the algorithm mark you. Let the silence notice you. Because once you're seen, you're no longer.